In the Vietnam War, some of the deadliest battles were not fought with rifles. They were fought with knives. In complete silence, just a few feet from the enemy. In this episode, Vietnamese commando veteran Vu Quang Dong recalls one of the most dangerous missions of his life, crossing the Saigon River under cover of darkness, silently eliminating an enemy reconnaissance team, and later capturing a South Vietnamese scout alive. These are his memories, told in his own words. A river crossing. Following political officer Quay's proposal, the 14 new recruits were divided into 3 combat teams. Quay personally took command of Team 7, while Tam and Kai led Teams 5 and 6. Myself and Anch Tu suggested mixing experienced soldiers with the newcomers so that every team would have veterans to guide the recruits. But in the end, Commander Bay agreed with Quay's plan. There was a reason behind that decision. Another combat team, led by Kin, had once consisted entirely of new soldiers and had performed well in battle, so everyone assumed this arrangement would work again. It was also Quay's idea to split the unit into 2 separate groups. Commander Bay would lead our veterans toward Cu Chi, where our primary objective was the heavily defended Dong Du base. Quay, meanwhile, would take the 3 newly formed teams toward Highway 13 and the Lai Kay area. Looking back now, I'm still not sure why Commander Bay agreed so quickly. After 2 days of preparation, he led 20 of us, organized into 4 combat teams, toward Cu Chi, exactly as the plan had outlined. None of us knew that before we even reached our destination, we would find ourselves fighting one of the most unforgettable close-quarters battles of the war. Not with rifles, but with nothing more than pistols and knives. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Commander Bay led our column out. By the time we reached the Thai Tin River, darkness had already fallen. We crossed the river quickly and arrived at one of our base areas near Un Dien. Kin's team was ordered to stay behind and secure the position. Although Un Dien had an underground tunnel system, Commander Bay chose not to take the rest of us inside. After assigning Kin's mission, he continued forward with the remaining 17 men, Antu's team, Thai's team, my team, and our messenger, Min. Our destination, Cu Chi. After crossing a small country road and moving through An Tay, the night was pitch black. Commander Bay led us quietly along the edge of the rice fields, following a narrow road toward the Saigon River. Sometime after 1 o'clock in the morning, we reached the Roch Bap area. Ahead of us was a road running alongside the river. Enemy outposts guarded both directions. Upstream was the Ract Bap position. Downstream lay a civilian hamlet, brightly lit with electric lights that shimmered across the darkness. There was only one way to reach the river, and it meant passing straight through the enemy's line. Antu's team was leading the column. Suddenly, they spotted a tiny red glow in the darkness. A cigarette. Antu immediately signaled everyone to freeze. He and one of his men crawled forward to investigate. Several tense minutes later, he returned. "There are enemy soldiers lying across the road," he whispered. "They're waiting in ambush." We're almost certain they're reconnaissance commandos. The situation changed in an instant. The enemy was directly in front of us. There was no time to debate. Should we attack or try to pull back? The decision had to be made immediately. Commander Bay looked ahead for a long moment. Then he made his choice. We would attack, carefully watching the enemy. We could make out only one sentry. He sat facing the Saigon River, smoking quietly, while standing guard. The rest of the men lay stretched out across the road, fast asleep by all logic. They should already have returned to their base. Rach Bap was barely a kilometer away. Why they had chosen to sleep here, none of us could understand. We quietly pulled back a safe distance from the enemy and began to prepare. Every unnecessary piece of gear came off. Our packs stayed behind for this fight. We carried only our pistols and our daggers. Min, our messenger, remained behind to guard the equipment. Even Commander Bay removed his shirt, just like the rest of us. Then we waited. A cool breeze drifted in from the Saigon River. It was calm, almost peaceful. The hours between 2 and 3 in the morning are when people sleep the deepest, and men who had eaten well before lying down slept even harder. Eventually, the enemy changed sentries. The new guard took out a cigarette and lit it. He drew a long, slow breath. Maybe he was still half asleep. Maybe his thoughts had already drifted home to his family, or perhaps to the girl waiting for him. Whatever was on his mind, it wasn't us. He sat with his back toward our position. A serious mistake. A sentry should watch every direction. He should have been facing inland with the river protecting his back. Instead, he was looking the wrong way. Commander Bay gave the signal. 3 assault teams. Commander Bay led one, and 2 led another. I led the third. Without a word, we slipped into the darkness. We crawled, slowly, patiently, inch by inch, exactly the way we had crawled through the barbed wire defenses at Lai Khe and Dongdu countless times before. Nothing mattered, except keeping our breathing silent. There was no reason to hurry. The enemy wasn't going anywhere. Every movement had to be perfect. Every sound could mean death. After what felt like an eternity, we were finally within striking distance. No one spoke. No one even dared to breathe too deeply. Then, everything happened at once. Like a tiger springing from the shadows, And 2 lunged straight at the sentry. The guard never had a chance. At that exact moment, the rest of us burst from the darkness. No gunfire, no shouting, only daggers. We struck fast, again and again, before the enemy even understood what was happening. The attack was over almost as quickly as it had begun. More than 10 enemy commandos lay dead. A few of them woke just long enough to struggle, but they had been sleeping inside their mosquito nets, lightweight fabric shelters commonly used by soldiers in Vietnam to keep insects away while sleeping. As they fought to free themselves from the tangled fabric, it was already too late. The night remained strangely quiet. Only the wind moved through the trees, and mixed with it, the muffled gasps, the choking sounds of men dying before they even knew who had attacked them. People often claimed that these reconnaissance commandos were elite fighters. highly trained, masters of hand-to-hand combat. Maybe they were, but when you are attacked in your sleep by men who have already reached you without making a sound, even the greatest fighter in the world has no chance. The entire fight lasted only moments. No rifle shots, only dull thuds, short grunts, and the desperate final breaths of dying men. A cold wind swept in from the Saigon River, yet every one of us was drenched in sweat. The moment it was over, each team quickly counted its men. No one was wounded. Without saying another word, we slipped away to the riverbank and crossed the Saigon River before daylight could expose us. Once we reached the other side of the Saigon River, only then did we finally allow ourselves to breathe. We checked every team one last time. Not a single man had been wounded. The mission was over, or so we thought. Even after swimming across the Saigon River at high tide, after the river had washed us from head to toe, we still couldn't get rid of the smell of blood. It clung to our bodies. It seemed to seep into our skin. It even lingered in the back of our throats. No matter how hard we washed, it wouldn't go away. One of the younger soldiers couldn't hide his excitement. "I got 2 of them," he said proudly. Another man sat in silence for a long moment before finally speaking. "I only stabbed 1. He shook his head. I'll never forget it. The blood sprayed all over my face, and when I pulled the knife out, everything came out with it. The smell. I thought I was going to throw up." No one laughed. No one mocked him. We all knew exactly what he meant. Somehow, during the fight, Thai's B-40 rocket launcher had been bent. B-40 was the Vietnamese designation for the Soviet RPG-2 anti-tank rocket launcher. He claimed it happened when he smashed the enemy's field radio with it. Under normal circumstances, I probably would have questioned him about damaging a weapon. But after what we had just been through, and with everyone safely back, I simply let it go. I remembered something else. Before the attack, I had tied the lanyard of my dagger tightly around my wrist. That simple habit saved me. Otherwise, I don't think I could have pulled the knife back out. The handle had become so slippery with blood that my grip almost failed. Over in Anch 2's shelter, and in Thai's, the men stayed awake, talking quietly about the battle. For every one of us, it had been the first time killing an enemy with nothing but a dagger. No one could sleep that night. The following morning, Commander Bay gathered the entire unit. The first thing he said was something I have never forgotten. We were lucky. We outnumbered them, and that was why we wiped them out. Otherwise, it could have ended very differently. Those words stayed with me. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't boasting. He was reminding us how close we had come to disaster. If even a single shot had been fired that night, I don't believe any of us would have made it home alive. Not far from where the enemy reconnaissance team had been sleeping, there were enemy positions in both directions. A few kilometers upstream stood another strong defensive position. It was protected by armored personnel carriers. The M113 armored vehicle used by the South Vietnamese Army, tanks, trucks, and a large number of troops ready to move at a moment's notice. Downstream was the Rak Bap base. It wasn't a large base, but it was well known throughout the area. The moment gunfire echoed across the river, reinforcements would have come from every direction. Looking back now, I realize something else. If Commander Bay had hesitated, if he had delayed making that decision, we would have been trapped in the open. There was nowhere to hide, no way to move, and in less than 2 hours, daybreak would have exposed every one of us. We would have become easy targets for helicopters and for the enemy forces stationed around Rak Bap. Even now, whenever I think back to that night, I still feel a chill run down my spine. People often ask what frightened us most during the war: close combat or malaria. After everything we endured, I can honestly say this: if I had been forced to choose between another knife fight or another bout of malaria, I'd choose the knife fight, without hesitation. We had been at our new base in ANPEU for only a week. During that time, we hadn't fought a single battle. Then urgent news reached us. Political Officer Quay's force was in serious trouble. Commander Bay immediately ordered everyone back to Long Nguyen Yen. Kin's team was recalled as well. Only after we returned did we learn what had happened. Quay had led the newly formed teams out to set an ambush. Everything went according to plan, until they unexpectedly ran into soldiers from the ARVN 5th Infantry Division. The Army of the Republic of Vietnam, commonly known as ARVN, was the military force of South Vietnam. The battle ended in disaster. 6 of our men were killed. 5 more were wounded. Even Quay himself had been hit in the shoulder by fragments from an M79 grenade round. Later, Quay told us what had happened. We had just finished laying our mines when an enemy patrol appeared. The trap worked. Several of them were hit. The survivors turned and ran, so we chased them. We wanted to finish them off. He paused for a moment. None of us realized their main force was right behind them. In war, every army follows a simple rule. The first soldiers you see are often not the main force. They're usually a reconnaissance or advance element, sent ahead to probe the route and detect danger. If that lead group is a platoon, there may be an entire battalion following behind. If it's only a squad, a company may not be far away. Their job is to make first contact. The larger force is close enough to reinforce them almost immediately. That's exactly what had happened. Quay's men had unknowingly attacked the enemy's advance element, without realizing that the rest of the division was only moments away. Commander Bay said nothing, but I noticed his eyes. They had become wet. He didn't need to say how deeply the loss had affected him. I asked Commander Bay for permission to return to the battlefield where Quay's unit had been hit. Today, people might call it a battlefield investigation. Back then, we simply wanted to understand what had happened. Without hesitation, Commander Bay agreed. After lunch, 3 of us set out. Tai, carrying the B-Silly-N-Do, and me. Our destination was the Lai Hung Lai K area. Not long after we left, a heavy rainstorm rolled in. Within minutes, our cloth hats were soaked through. The brims drooped over our ears as rain poured from the sky. Taking advantage of the storm, I urged everyone to move faster. Fortunately, our camouflage jackets, lightweight camouflage garments, woven with grass and foliage to help soldiers blend into the jungle, kept most of the rain off our bodies. As quickly as it had begun, the rain stopped. That was the rainy season in southern Vietnam. A sudden downpour, followed by clear skies. But walking through the jungle after a storm was no easier. Rainwater continued dripping from the trees. The trails became slick with mud. Our pace slowed. After crossing several small streams, night fell. I knew of an abandoned base nearby, so I led everyone there. There were nearly a dozen bunkers scattered throughout the area. Who had built them, I had no idea, but they were large enough to shelter an entire battalion. Instead of choosing one in the center, I picked a bunker beside a narrow stream. During the rainy season, it carried water. In the dry season, it became nothing more than a shallow creek. The bunker stood nearly 50 meters away from the others. Whoever had built it clearly intended it to serve as an outer security position from there. It was easy to observe the surrounding area, and just as easy to withdraw if necessary. We immediately went through our standard security routine. We erased our footprints, camouflaged the bunker entrance, set several grenades as early warning traps. Only then did we climb inside. We closed the camouflage hatch above us, hung our hammocks, took off our camouflage jackets, then sat quietly, eating cold rice balls with nothing but salt. It was a simple meal, but after a full day's march, it tasted just fine. Suddenly, Tai raised his hand. Silence. Every one of us stopped eating. Somewhere outside, voices, faint at first, then clearer. People were talking, several of them, and, among the voices, we could hear women. Tai immediately blew out our small oil lamp. It wasn't a candle, but a simple homemade kerosene lamp. He carefully cracked open the camouflage hatch and peered outside. It was too dark. He couldn't see a thing, but the voices were still there, coming from the cluster of bunkers deeper inside the base. People were talking quietly, calling to one another. Then we heard something unexpected. Women's voices out in the jungle. A woman's voice carried much farther through the night than a man's. We had no idea who they were. Soldiers, civilian workers, or perhaps youth volunteers. Youth volunteers were civilian support teams who transported supplies, built roads, evacuated the wounded, and performed other dangerous tasks behind the front lines. At that hour, there was no point trying to find out. Approaching an unknown unit in the middle of the night was extremely dangerous. If they mistook us for enemy reconnaissance troops, and we failed to answer the correct password, they would open fire without hesitation. I quietly told Tai to close the hatch. We finished our rice. Then everyone tried to get some sleep. Du took the first watch. Tai would relieve him later. Just before dawn, it would be my turn. According to my watch, it was around 4 in the morning. I was sitting quietly at the bunker entrance when suddenly, boom, another explosion, then another, and another. The blasts erupted all around us, so close that none of us could tell where they were coming from. Du and Tai sprang awake instantly. The explosions were sharp, violent, continuous. Were they artillery? Airstrikes? Jet aircraft? None of us could tell. If the shells had come from Lai Kei, we should have heard the distant rumble of the guns, or at least the whistle of incoming rounds. But this was different. The explosions crashed, one after another, without pause. Only years later, after thinking back carefully about that morning, did I come to believe that they had been B-52 bombs. Almost immediately afterward, heavy artillery began pouring into the area, as if the enemy intended to erase everything alive from the jungle. The noise became overwhelming. I couldn't even hear what Tai was shouting beside me. The bunker shook violently. Dirt rained down from the ceiling. For a moment, it felt as though the entire earth above us was about to collapse. We pressed ourselves tightly against the bunker walls, waiting, listening, praying. Fortunately, no shell struck our bunker directly, and there was no smell of explosives drifting inside. Among North Vietnamese soldiers, the smell of explosives was often nicknamed Mui Shin Han, a field slang term whose exact origin remains unclear, but was widely understood among veterans. We hurriedly gathered our equipment, put our camouflage jackets back on, checked our weapons, and prepared ourselves for whatever came next. It was after 5 in the morning when the bombing and shelling finally stopped. We pushed open the camouflage hatch, desperate for fresh air. Then we looked outside. Surprisingly, our bunker hadn't been hit at all. Not a single bomb crater. Not a single artillery impact. The bombardment had fallen somewhere nearby. One by one, people began climbing out of the other bunkers. There were more than 30 of them, men and women alike. They immediately began checking their numbers. Then someone shouted. One of the bunkers had collapsed. Everyone rushed over. Bare hands clawed through the dirt. Within moments, 4 people were pulled out alive. Miraculously, none of them had been seriously injured. The bunker itself hadn't taken a direct hit. Its roof had simply given way under the enormous shock waves. As soon as everyone was accounted for, their leaders wasted no time. The entire group packed up and moved out immediately. They walked fast, very fast. They understood what was likely coming next. From years of experience, we had learned something. When the enemy spent nearly an hour pounding an area with bombs and artillery, it usually meant only one thing. Ground troops would soon move in. The bombardment was preparing the battlefield. We looked around our own position. Our temporary base remained untouched. Hidden deep in the jungle, it was exactly as we had left it. That raised another question. Why hadn't they fired here? Had they simply failed to find us? Or had they deliberately avoided this area, hoping anyone who fled the bombardment would run straight into their waiting forces? In war, there are always many possibilities. No one can ever know for certain. But one thing seemed clear. The enemy had already begun a large search operation. Danger was closing in fast. Years of experience had taught me one simple lesson. When the bombs stop, that's when the real danger begins. I looked at my men. Out of the bunker. Run! None of us knew that before this day was over, we would come face to face with an enemy scout who would change everything. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Vietnam War Memoirs. These are not stories from history books. They are the memories of the men who lived through the Vietnam War. If you enjoy hearing these first-hand accounts, we'd be honored if you subscribed and joined us on this journey to preserve them for future generations. In the next episode, after escaping a devastating bombardment, Vu Quang Dong and his small team run straight into an enemy scout deep inside the jungle. Instead of pulling the trigger, they make a split-second decision to capture him alive. That decision would lead to one of the most remarkable missions in his entire memoir. Until next time, these memories belong to those who lived them. Thank you for helping preserve them.